Thank you, Rabbi Mark, and I would like to also thank IGS for inviting me today to lead the daily meditation. Good morning, good afternoon, shalom to everyone. Today it is my favorite day of the week, Friday, as we are getting ready for tomorrow's day of rest, a day of being compared to 6 days of doing for Shabbat. The root of Shabbat, as you all know, in the Hebrew has to do with to stop, to sit. So tomorrow, all over the world, the Torah portion, the parasha that will be read is Vayechi. The name of it is based on the first word of the parasha. It says Vayechi Yaakov, translated as Yaakov lived. It is a special parasha because it brings to close a long period of studying the first book of out of the 5 books of Moses, which is called the Chumash, 5 books of Moses. So the book of Bereshit, Genesis, we're going to say goodbye after studying Genesis for a long time, cultivating great wisdom when we delved into the poetic narratives, stories, and legends that portray the lives of our ancestors, our fathers and mothers, avot and imaot. So, as we said, the parasha starts with the word Vayechi, which is a word that implies life and to live. But the truth is that in tomorrow's weekly portion, we are actually saying our goodbyes to both Yaakov. His name, of course, is also Israel, which means to struggle with the divine, and really captures his complex personality. And we also say goodbye to his son Yosef. Joseph, who is in the rabbinic tradition, is called Yosef HaTzadik. He's considered a great mensch for many reasons, but mostly for his work on forgiveness. So, but by the way, the Haftarah reading for tomorrow invites us to say goodbye to another archetypal figure in our tradition, to King David. And when we read the Haftarah, we can ponder about the transition of power to his son Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, who is considered to be the wisest of all kings. So studying the Torah portion for tomorrow brings us an opportunity to look deeply into matters of life and death, and to see once again that life and death are really two sides of the same coin. In a way, it is similar to the themes that we have processed here together during Hanukkah, when we came to realize that darkness and light are interwoven one into the other. So before we sit today, I wanted to share with you a few words also about myself and how psychotherapy and Jewish mindfulness are really complementary in my life. So I started to walking on the path, which is, by the way, interesting. The word halacha, Jewish law, we translate it in English to Jewish law, has to do also with walking on a path. So I started my path in Jewish mindfulness somewhere at the beginning of like in 2012 or 14. We were debating. I was just talked with Mark about it before we started, when my colleague at Jewish Family Service in San Diego, Rabbi Berg, invited me to join her to a project that IJS had back then, a project of introducing midot work, working on improving virtues, introduced them to different communities around the States. So that's when also when I met Rabbi Mark. It was a lovely experience for me back then because it connected me with my Jewish roots. So and I continued my journey when I joined the program, the JMMT TT, which is a certification program for anyone who is interested in teaching mindfulness. And this opportunity, I would like to thank my wonderful teachers, Rabbi Jeff, Rabbi Sheila, Rabbi Jordan, and Rabbi Miriam. And also, I would also like to thank my rabbi here in San Diego, Rabbi Ron Schulman. So I want to share with you that studying mindfulness started for me really when I was a psychology graduate student in 2002. Back then I was on a fast track to becoming a psychoanalyst, but I realized that I find myself engaged more and more in practicing and studying mindfulness. It really started with doing lots of Tai Chi. It became really rewarding for me, and I realized that there is a lot of healing secrets, sodot, in the practice, and that it helps me and also my clients. And since then, I'm practicing mindfulness. Luckily, or if you want to say miraculously, I have here in San Diego, close by to me, one of the Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh's monasteries. So I had the opportunity to attend the monastery many times and also to participate in retreats led by Thich Nhat Hanh. So, and I can share with you, which firsthand, that I heard from him many times, that he an emphasis on or even a plea to integrate one's background and heritage into one's practice. So I think that that's what I definitely am doing here today. I remember, in fact, coming home after attending events and retreats with prominent mindfulness teachers such as Jack Kornfield, John Kabat-Zinn, Sharon Zalsberg, and Sylvia Brunstein. Exciting, I would come home really excited to share with my wife what I learned, and my wife will always used to tell me, hey, if you dig deep, you will find all this wealth of wisdom in the Jewish teaching, in the Torah. So today we are discussing Vayechi, and for me the big takeaway has to do with something that is considered crucial when it comes to a healthy self and to a healthy mind. It is the notion of continuity. So tomorrow at the synagogue around the world we will say Chazak, Chazak v'nitchazek, which is also translated as may we be strengthened. We will say that when we finish reading from the Torah, and for a moment we will feel the separation from the book of Bereshit. However, by the end of Shabbat we will already open the next fascinating book, the book of Shemot, Exodus, a book that shifts the story from stories of individuals to a story of a nation. So I think this practice is beautiful way to remind us that life is in a way linear, but it's also circular, and that the manifestations in our mind or body, when one manifestation ends, another or other manifestations begin. So I can continue talking, but I think that enough with my speaking, and that we will all benefit from shifting into practice. So I invite you to find a comfortable seat on a chair or a cushion, maybe lying down or standing up, whatever works for you. You can close your eyes or just maintain a soft gaze downwards. And the kavanah, point of concentration, for today has to do with continuity, circularity. Thich Nhat Hanh used to say that life and death are playing hide and seek. And indeed, in his monasteries, birthdays are celebrated as days of manifestation. It is a very deep teaching. It is hard to pinpoint the moment we are born. Is it when we come to the world, or maybe when we are conceived, or maybe when our parents fall in love and decide to start a family? So I invite you now to let go of all these complex notions and thoughts, and simply observe your breath. We will engage today in a simple conscious breathing practice. You don't need to manipulate your breathing, you just want to observe it. The way to do it is to pay attention to the air flowing through your nostrils. You can pay attention to your belly or your abdomen rising and falling. Pay especially attention to the transitional moments between the in-breath and the out-breath. I will invite the bell 3 times throughout our meditation. When you hear the bell, it is a moment of return to observing the breath, what we call tshuva, coming back. When Sharon Salzberg came to Jewish Family Service in San Diego, she said that the most important moment is the moment when we return to the present, to our breath. I guess that moment is the moment we connect to the divine. That is the moment when we walk on the narrow bridge of life with no fear, without being caught in the hide-and-seek interplay of life and death. So just observe your breathing. Breathing in, breathing out. You can say to yourself in your mind when you breathe in, and out when you breathe out. Returning to your breath, you can say to yourself in when you breathe in, out when you breathe out. Jack Cornfield used to say that returning to observing the breath is like bringing a puppy back to our laps, gently, respectfully. In, out, in, out. Maybe your mind has traveled into thoughts, memories, feelings, physical sensations, physical pain. Just gently come back to observing your breath. One way to practice is that just to state to yourself throughout the meditation, when you experience thoughts, you just state thoughts, memories, pain, just stating in your mind and coming back to observing your breath. The metaphor is a metaphor of us sitting in front of a river, our consciousness. We look at it. If we fall into it, we gently step out again to the bank of the river to observe the river, and the river is flowing. Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. We'll continue for another minute or so, and then when you will hear 3 sounds of the bell, it would be a sign to gently open your eyes and transitioning back into your space, into our virtual space, in your physical space that is surrounding you. The key would be to do a transitional shift. And just gradually you can open your eyes, look around the room, get back from the meditation. And I would like to end with a poem, a nice Israeli poem, before we do the Moner Kaddish. So this is a poem by an Israeli poet, a very creative poet. A lot of her work is for children, but as we know from watching Disney movies, they always have a lot of wisdom in them. So the poem is called Ending is Always a Beginning. Ending is always a beginning of something different. Is this something better? Is this something worse? I don't know what is this something. It is something different. When the road ends, a path starts. When the night ends, morning begins. When an hour ends, another hour arrives. Only at the end of knowing, error begins. Because ending is always a beginning. There is always a tomorrow to every day that passes. Every used dream is replaced with another. When a year ends, another year starts. Every answer starts only at the end of a question, because ending is always a beginning. When the movie starts, when the movie ends, life begins. The music starts when there are no more words. And when we finish playing the music, then we will start playing different music. and when we finish the song, we will start to talk, because ending is always a beginning. And the poet name is Leah Naor. Thank you.
Oded, thank you so much for sharing your story and for that sweet and lovely meditation practice to lead us into Shabbat. And friends, we seal the practice, as we always do, by offering an opportunity for those who are in mourning or observing a yard site to recite the Kaddish, or if it's your practice, to engage and to share in the Kaddish. You can share the name or names of those you're honoring today in the chat box now, or after we recite the Kaddish. And for those who are not reciting Kaddish, the practice is to stay present, to be a witness, to be an attentive, compassionate presence for those who are. I'll invite to join me by rising in body or in spirit for Kaddish together. Yitgadal Yitgadash Shemei Rabbah Ya'amal Dibra Fiyutei V'Yamlich V'Malchutei V'Chayachon L'Yomechon Beit Yisrael Ba'agala V'Zman Karib V'Yamru Omein Yehei Shmei Rabbah Nishbarach L'Olam L'Almei Almayah Yishtabach Voar V'Yikramlam V'Yitnaseh Tadar V'Taleh V'Talal Shemei Kedusha B'Richu Elam Yipol Birchata Birata Tushbechata V'Nechemata Amiram V'Alma V'Yimru Omein Barak V'Yaleh Mudal Kol Yisrael V'Yimru Omein Ru Shalom V'Mruma V'Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael
Kol Yoshvei Tevel, Yimru, Amen.
Tevel,
Okay. Mine says chat disabled.
Oh, see what happens when Adi is not here? The chat is now enabled, so if you wanted to share name or names of those you were honoring in the Kaddish in the chat box now, please do so. I apologize. There are a lot of things to keep track of when you're handling this tech piece. Kol hakavod to Adi. So we miss him. Thank you for your perseverance and patience with me today. Oded, I want to thank you so much for leading us in practice today. I want to thank myself for holding the tech space. I want to thank all of you for showing up. Just a reminder that next week we will be meeting for our live sessions Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Will be led on Monday by Cantor Louise Treitman, who has the beautiful custom of leading us whenever it's the beginning of a new sefer, a new book of Torah. So Louise will lead us on Monday for the beginning of the book of Shemot, the book of Exodus. On Tuesday, Cantor Kareth Spencer Shapiro will lead us, and on Wednesday, Rabbi George Gittleman will be leading us. We will not be meeting for live sessions next Thursday and Friday, or the following week. We'll be on hiatus from this coming next Thursday through the end of 2021 and back in January for beginning of 2022. And we hope to see you next week for practice. If you're leaving us now, if you're not, if you're able to stay on for conversation with Oded about today's teaching and practice, please do so. And if you have a question, I'll try to keep an eye on that in the chat box. For those who are leaving for now, wish you Shabbat Shalom, a sweet Shabbat. So Oded, I want to thank you. I really appreciated both. It was really nice to hear at least a piece of your story and your journey, and it was very touched. My heart was very touched by that. And also want to have an opportunity to talk a little bit about and unpack this theme of continuity, circularity, which you alluded to and connected to the parasha with the which is full of paradoxes of, it's the end of the book, it's the end of Yaakov's life, it's the end of Joseph's life, and yet we know, because we know already, because we've read the book already, that there's a lot coming down the pipe, right? So I wanted to give you a chance to talk about that a little bit. Like, what do you, in terms of practice, you brought our attention to the breath. And in the breath, we were noticing the breath coming, going, beginning, ending. So was that what you meant in terms of circularity by bringing your attention to the breath? Is that anything you want to elaborate on there?
Yes. So I think that when it comes to Jewish mindfulness, one of the practices has to do with studying Torah. We do the blessing in the morning, and then we study Torah throughout the day in different ways. And we cultivate wisdom. But sometimes the wisdom, it's just hard to hold it. And indeed, sometimes we meet people who are highly they hold it in an intellectual manner. So I think that by the practice of conscious breathing, or by praying with kavanah, we have an opportunity to engage really in continuity. So conscious breathing, when we breathe, and at the beginning of the practice, I invited everyone also to pay attention to those moments of transitioning, the transitioning between the in-breath and the out-breath. It gives us an invitation to engage in this really complicated idea and notion, continuity. It's really that takes us to the infinity of the divine, really.
Yes.
Right? But in a very concrete manner. And that's what's so nice about it, I think.
Yeah. Laura's asking, would you please say a bit more about your thinking? Maybe this is just an extension of that. About your thinking and how the notion of continuity is crucial for a healthy mind and spirit. You were just alluding to, it's for at least the way I understood what you just said, is that this is a way in which we can actually have a lived experience of the divine, which is beyond, time and space, by being in that in between and noticing that we tend to break things down into parts. We think there's a beginning and an end, and then when we notice the beginning and the end, we realize, no, that's just like the gateway into it's all happening. It's all unfolding on an ongoing basis, much bigger than I thought it was. What do you think about that? As a therapist, in terms of, because you're using the word healthy mind, healthy spirit, how do you experience that in your practice?
So I agree with you that when we can generate that perspective, understanding the bigger picture, and you can say really connecting to the divine, which is hard for us because we are beings that, our experience and our life also, we have a beginning and an end. So it's hard for us to connect to infinity. And that's how the divine is represented in Kabbalah. So, but when we can get a little bit of it, I think that's where we flourish. That's where we understand the bigger picture.
How do you use it in your practice, Oded? In your therapy practice?
As a therapist?
Yeah.
I do a backdoor Judaism. I think that the therapy is all about it's all about mindfulness, really. So there are lots of things that are going on in a therapy session, but one thing has to do with finding, helping with slowing down, helping with clients that come in for therapy sessions to slow down, to look at the big picture, and to try not to fall too many times into the river. I use the metaphor of a river to transform from being reactive more to a place of being responsive, to be more responsive. So in that regard, sometimes people are interested in learning the practice. At other times, I think that therapists, we just talked about it when we met before the meditation, how there are many therapists on the calls with IGS, and I remember also when I participated in the program, there were many therapists, because for therapists also the mindful and not just therapists, anyone who is in the healing professions or is working with others with providing care. Sometimes you need to engage in a mindfulness, in a moment of mindfulness. So I don't know if that's kind of answering the question.
Yeah, sure. It is totally. There is a question to ask. Really also really appreciated your sprinkling in of those teachings from Thich Nhat Hanh and Jack Kornfield. And it looks like a lot of people resonated with the metaphor of, sitting on the riverbank and watching the river and then falling in and stepping out. So there was a question about speaking about the message about heritage that you mentioned, about bringing your heritage into it. Maybe you say a little bit about how that landed for you.
So sure, as I said, the monastery here is very close to me, and in the beginning of, let's say, the 21st century, it's unbelievable. We're almost a quarter of a century in. But I remember when
and the computers are still working. Amazing.
Computers are still working. So I remember mental health became very engaged with mindfulness, and I think that John Kabat-Zinn was one of the first ones who came to mainstream providers in the hospital and said, this is going to work. Today, it's mainstream, but back then, there was a sense that it's esoteric, but I saw how it is integrated into psychotherapy now. As I said, when I went to listen to Thich Nhat Hanh, he would say, go and explore your roots, from where you come. What are your traditions? What is the wisdom? What is the wisdom that is in your tradition, that is passed down the line? Mm. So now for me, of course, as you can sense by my accent, although sometimes when I go to play tennis or something, people say, are you from France, Oded? I say, no, I'm from Israel. So, I've been here for many years, over 20 years now. But of course, there is the longings to Israel, to Israeli culture, not just to the falafel, but then suddenly you realize that it's a birthright, and there are so many secrets. As I said, I would come home and my wife would say, check it out, you'll find it there, and it's true. We find all those ideas that are in other traditions, such as the Buddhist tradition. We find it in our own tradition. Mm-hmm. So I think that, and to wrap things up, when it comes to mental health, we talk about integration. Although, the big word, because they wanted to make it scientific, is psychoanalysis, analyzing the mind, but it's really all about holism and putting things together. Which I think is the challenge for us in Judaism and in the world.
Lori asked a question, which I think, it just carries over because there's been a theme a little bit this week about awareness of ancestors, which was another way of understanding continuity. While I was sitting today, I was aware of being in a river of continuity of, my family, my people, and that I have this illusion that my life began and ends here, but actually, especially when people get deep into genealogical studies and realizing, whoa, I'm part of this, unbelievably much bigger reality that I didn't realize I was part of. I was thinking about that in terms of intergenerational continuity. I don't know if you're a systems therapist at all, but in terms of awareness of what we carry from ancestors and what we transmit to those who come after us. Lori's question is specifically about what we carry in our bodies, hearts, and spirits from our ancestors, and wrote that I am calmed leaning into that continuity. What's your sense about that?
I can just share a quick memory that when I first went to hear Thich Nhat Hanh many years ago, he raised his hand and he said, can you see my mother here? Can you see my father here? Right there. So he would do another thing. He will take a paper and say, hey, can you see the trees? Can you see the water? He talks a lot about, how things are connected and related, interbeing, I think that's how they call it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, that's the real wisdom of all the traditions. And of course, we have it in Judaism and other traditions to connect to the big picture, to connect to go back in time, then we can also go forward in time. Tfilat Shmona Esrei Amidah starts by evoking
Mhm.
fathers and mothers. So I think that, when we are isolated, when we are split off, that's when we are in pain.
Yeah. Well, a lot of wisdom there. I really appreciate. Like, I'm envious of you being so close to that monastery and the wisdom that you clearly have gotten, and very grateful to you for bringing in even just a sprinkling of those teachings for us today. So, Oded, thank you so much. I'm really so glad that you offered to lead us today. Sounds like, looks to me like many people are appreciative of that as well. And thank you for being part of this community of practice. Now, it's really very moving to think of having met, whatever, 8-9 years ago, and to continue the journey together. The same goes for many people who are still here. So we wish everybody Shabbat Shalom, and hope to see you on Monday for practice with Cantor Louise Treitman, and hope everyone has a restorative, beautiful Shabbat, Vayechi, and we'll see you on the other side.